Ever since the whole OGL 1.1 fiasco broke, there's been a lot of talk in the industry and on YouTube about licenses for role-playing games. And that's a topic that people ask me about all the time. On this channel, I cover a lot of small, independent role-playing games, often ones that are built off of the basic structure of old D&D rules. And these games come with all sorts of different licenses. And I often get asked for my opinion on which licenses are best or which license someone should use when they are developing their own game. Now, I'm not a copyright lawyer, but I do know a little bit about this topic, and I do have some recommendations and some things that you should think about when you're deciding on whether your game needs a license or not. First of all, remember that in the United States, anything that you write is automatically copyrighted. There's no legal process that you have to go through to make sure that it belongs to you. You made it, so you own it. The main reason why you might want to attach a license to a game you wrote is to create some clarity around what other people are allowed to do when they use your copyrighted work. This doesn't have to be a big page of legalese. It can just be a note at the front of the book that informs people of what you're okay with. One of my favorite examples of this is the legal text at the front of the Gonzo science fiction RPG Troika, where it says, anyone may publish free or commercial material based upon and or declaring compatibility with Troika without express permission from the publisher, the Melsonian Arts Council, as long as they adhere to the following terms. If your products declare compatibility with Troika, you must state the following in your legal text and on websites from which a commercial product is sold. Product name is an independent production by publisher name and is not affiliated with the Melsonian Arts Council. The Melsonian Arts Council takes no responsibility for any legal claims against your product. The mechanics of Troika may be used freely. Art and text may not be reused. All artists maintain copyright of their work. What I like about this disclaimer is that it's just restating what the law generally is. It's not possible to legally protect game mechanics, and it's perfectly fine to say that your product is compatible with a competitor's, as long as you don't give the impression that you are endorsed by or affiliated with them. It's nice that Troika has this anyway, though, because a lot of people are leery about mentioning other people's trademarks when talking about compatibility, even though it's usually fine. This disclaimer is pretty similar to what Kevin Crawford has said about his excellent Worlds Without Number game. When asked about it on Reddit, he said, other publishers can explicitly say compatible with Worlds Without Number in the product and advertising, provided that they don't present it as an official product. I think this sort of approach is probably the best for most people who are publishing their own role-playing game. It gives other creators the clarity that they're not going to get sued for making something that works with your game, and you automatically retain legal ownership of the text and any trademarks that you might have. There's two other avenues that you might want to consider though. Creating an SRD to allow people to use text that's in your book, or using a Creative Commons license if you really want to open things up, as I did for my games Maze Rats and Knave. Before we get into that though, quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by my favorite t-shirt company, Into the AM. I am, as usual, wearing one of their shirts today for the simple reason that they look good and they feel good. Random people on the street have complimented me on them, which always feels awesome. A lot of their shirts have sci-fi themes, like the one I'm wearing here with the astronaut suit being reclaimed by nature, but really they have designs that would fit with pretty much any role-playing game that you might be running. Into the AM has some great deals, like 20% off when you buy a set of 3 graphic tees, and an additional 10% off if you use my link in the description below. Thanks again to Into the AM for sponsoring, and now let's get back to it. So if you want to open up your game more than usual and allow people to actually use text that you've written in their own products, then it might be a good idea to create a system reference document, or SRD. This is the strategy that Wizards of the Coast took back in the day, whereby using their open gaming license, you were authorized to use a huge chunk of D&D in whatever you wanted. However, the original open gaming license was also intended to be used by publishers other than Wizards of the Coast, in order to mark certain sections of their text as open game content that could be used by anyone. This was an incredibly useful feature, and hundreds of products made use of it. With the ongoing fiasco surrounding whether the open gaming license will be nullified, however, it's probably best to stay away from any version of the OGL, at the very least until we know what's going on. I've heard that Paizo is in the process of creating a replacement called the ORC, but it's not finished yet, so it's not really an option. You can still create SRDs for public use though, even if you don't use the OGL. A great and very simple example of this is the Mark of the Odd license created by Chris McDowell for his Into the Odd role-playing game, which I'm a big fan of. That license simply says, want to use Into the Odd as a base for your game or module? Anyone can give their game the Mark of the Odd by adhering to these guidelines. You can use text directly from the SRD. You can use the Mark of the Odd logo. You can use other concepts from the book, such as starter packages and arcana or oddities, but do not use text from Into the Odd that is not included in the SRD. Create your own content to fill these sections out. Credit Chris McDowell for being the original creator of Into the Odd, and include a link to bastionland.com. This is a general license. If you want to negotiate a license with different terms, please get in touch at bastionlandpress@gmail.com. This is then followed by about 4 pages of text, which are the core rules of Into the Odd, which you're allowed to use directly in your own work. This whole framework for an SRD is super simple and easy to understand. You could easily use it as a model if you wanted to make your own SRD. But what if you want to open up your content even further? For that, you might consider the Creative Commons licenses. I use Creative Commons for my games, Maze, Rats, and Knave, and one of the things I like best about it is that when you go to their website, it walks you through a number of questions about what exactly you want the license to do, and then it tells you which license does exactly that. Using Creative Commons, you can state whether people are allowed to share adaptions of your work, whether they are allowed to commercialize your work, and whether they have to attribute it to you. In the most extreme case, you can even waive all rights to a particular work, putting it entirely in the public domain through the use of the Creative Commons 0 license. And there's nothing stopping you from using a more restrictive license for one part of your work and a more permissive license for another part, effectively creating an SRD. The whole text of my games Maze, Rats, and Knave are released under a Creative Commons attribution license, meaning that people can use the text in any way that they want, including commercially, as long as they give me attribution. Knave even includes the original Word document that I used to make the game, which makes adapting it even easier. A big inspiration for me doing this was the RPG Dungeon World, which is released under the same Creative Commons license, and I'm convinced that opening up my work in this way has been a big part of its success. For most creators, especially creators in the very niche indie RPG scene, obscurity is a much bigger problem than piracy, and you want to get your work as widely dispersed in the culture and in the public consciousness as possible. I'll put links to where you can learn more about Creative Commons licenses in the description below. Well, that's it for this video. As you can see, there's a bunch of different options right here, and I'm sure there's many that I didn't even cover, but there are plenty of ways that you can open up your RPG to community development if that's what you want to do. And it doesn't need to be very complicated either. Let me know in the comments below if you found this to be helpful, and if there are any particular licenses that you prefer to use. If you want to help support Questing Beast and the videos that I make here, remember to subscribe and consider supporting the channel over on Patreon. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time.